The discovery and colonization of the New World offered European powers more than just new resources and territories. It presented a unique solution to pressing societal problems back home. For centuries, European nations grappled with issues of crime, poverty, and dissent. The vast, unexplored lands across the Atlantic became a convenient destination for those deemed undesirable. This practice of forced migration served a dual purpose for European governments. It effectively removed individuals who were considered burdens or threats from their societies. Simultaneously, these transported individuals provided a much-needed labor force for the burgeoning colonies. The demand for workers to clear land, cultivate crops, and build infrastructure was immense. Thus, the New World became a strategic outlet for Europe's internal pressures. The definition of undesirable was far from static. It shifted significantly across different European nations and historical periods. What constituted an unwanted individual in one era might not in another. This fluidity reflected changing social norms, economic needs, and political climates. Broadly, the term encompassed a wide spectrum of individuals. These included those who violated laws, those who were economically unproductive, and those who challenged established religious or political authority. The label was a convenient tool for social control. Convicts and criminals represented the most direct and obvious target for removal from European society. Their presence was seen as a threat to public order and a drain on state resources. Transportation offered a seemingly humane alternative to execution or perpetual imprisonment. Britain, in particular, engaged in large-scale transportation of its criminal population. This policy became a cornerstone of its penal system for over 2 centuries. Tens of thousands of British convicts were sent across the Atlantic. Many were destined for the American colonies, especially Virginia and Maryland. These colonies, with their labor-intensive tobacco plantations, eagerly absorbed the influx of workers. Convicts often faced a stark choice between execution or exile to a distant land. Upon arrival, these individuals typically became indentured servants. Their sentences usually ranged from 7 to 14 years, during which they labored under harsh conditions. This system provided cheap labor while simultaneously clearing British jails. Before the American Revolution, over 50,000 British convicts were transported to the American colonies. This massive demographic shift significantly impacted colonial society and labor dynamics. The practice only ceased with the colony's independence. Following the loss of its American colonies, Britain sought new destinations for its convicts. Australia emerged as the primary penal colony after 1788. This marked a new chapter in the history of forced migration and colonial development. France also utilized transportation as a means of dealing with its criminal element. Convicts were sent to various French colonies, including Louisiana in North America. These individuals were intended to help populate and develop the new territories. Later, France established notorious penal colonies in French Guiana, such as Devil's Island. These remote and harsh environments served as long-term destinations for serious offenders. The conditions there were often brutal and life-threatening. Beyond criminals, the poor and orphaned also found themselves subject to forced migration. England's poor laws, designed to manage poverty, inadvertently facilitated this deportation. Vagrants and the destitute were often seen as burdens on local parishes. To alleviate these burdens, authorities sometimes arranged for their removal to the colonies. These individuals were typically sent as indentured servants, their passage paid in exchange for years of labor. This practice offered a solution to both poverty and labor shortages. Portugal implemented a specific policy for orphans, particularly young women. These orphans of the king were sent to Brazil, often with dowries provided by the crown. The primary aim was to populate the vast Portuguese territory and encourage settlement. These young women were expected to marry and establish families in the New World. This policy was a deliberate effort to foster a stable European population in the colonies. It highlights a different facet of forced migration, driven by demographic goals. Religious and political dissenters constituted another category of individuals whose departure was often welcomed by European authorities. Their presence could destabilize established religious institutions or challenge state power. Exile offered a convenient way to maintain social cohesion. English examples include the Pilgrims and Puritans, who sought refuge from religious persecution. Their migration to North America was, in many ways, a self-imposed exile. However, their departure was certainly not discouraged by the English crown. For authorities, the emigration of these groups resolved internal conflicts without direct confrontation. It allowed for the maintenance of religious and political uniformity at home. The New World offered a distant haven for those seeking freedom of conscience. French Huguenots, Protestant dissenters, faced severe persecution after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685. This act stripped them of their religious freedoms and led to widespread oppression. Many were forced to flee France. These Huguenots often found sanctuary in English colonies, particularly in North America. Their skills and industriousness contributed significantly to the development of these new settlements. Their forced migration enriched the diversity of the colonial population. The concept of social outcasts and the worthless poor also played a role in shaping migration patterns. The founding of the colony of Georgia in 1732 exemplifies this approach. It was initially conceived as a haven for debtors and the worthy poor. The intention was to provide these individuals with a fresh start, away from the crushing poverty and social stigma of England. This philanthropic endeavor also served a strategic purpose for the British government. It aimed to remove these individuals from English society. By relocating them to Georgia, they could serve as a buffer against Spanish Florida. This dual objective highlights the complex motivations behind European colonial policies. Social welfare and imperial strategy often intertwined. It is crucial to understand that the transportation of undesirables was not the primary driver of European colonization. While significant, it was a secondary factor in the grand scheme of imperial expansion. Economic ambitions were paramount. The pursuit of valuable resources, such as gold, silver, furs, and timber, fueled much of the colonial enterprise. The desire for new trade routes and markets also played a dominant role. These economic incentives were the true engines of colonization. Furthermore, the vast majority of European immigrants to the New World came voluntarily. Millions sought new opportunities, land, or religious freedom. Many arrived as indentured servants, willingly trading years of labor for passage and a chance at a new life. However, conditions for both transported convicts and voluntary indentured servants were often incredibly harsh. The transatlantic voyage itself was perilous, and life in the colonies was fraught with disease, hard labor, and limited prospects. Many did not survive their terms of service. This historical narrative stands in stark contrast to the transatlantic slave trade. The forced migration of Europeans, while often brutal, differed fundamentally from the enslavement of Africans. Millions of Africans were forcibly transported as chattel property. They were stripped of their humanity, their labor exploited for generations, and their descendants subjected to systemic oppression. The transatlantic slave trade represented the ultimate and most brutal form of disposal of human beings. It was a system built on racialized violence and economic exploitation, unparalleled in its scale and cruelty.